And so up next, we've got, we've transitioned into some Maine music, but we've got one more guest repping Texas before we shift gears to talking about Maine. So we'd like to welcome on Lana Hansen from Blue Action Dems. She'll be coming on in just a second. And, you know, I just really want to take a moment and give a shout out to all the Texas partners that have helped us build this programming, Swing Left Austin, Swing Left ATX, the Abilene Young Democrats, and now Blue Action Dems. We really appreciate all of these grassroots organizations of people doing their best to help flip Texas blue. So welcome, Lana. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Karen.
So one of the first things I want to ask you is, I think for a lot of folks, and I was definitely this way in 2018, you hear about a lot of different organizations. There's Swing Left, there's, you know, the Democratic Party orgs, and but, you know, so where does Texas Blue Action Dems like sit in the universe of orgs, and what are the things you're working on that you're hoping people in and out of state can help you accomplish?
That is a fantastic question. And I think to help answer it, I'll tell you just a little bit about who we are and how we started. I think like a lot of the organizations, we were born out of this angst of what happened in 2016. And we were started by a woman named Carrie Collier Brown, who was actually at home on maternity leave with twins at the time. She's a lawyer and she lives in the suburb of Austin. And her angst was around nobody came and talked to us. Nobody from the Democratic Party, everybody assumed we were Republican. And what we had found out afterwards in analyzing the data was that, you know, the suburbs went to Trump. There was a lot of non-voting, and then the women who did vote voted for him. And so she said, you know, she looked around and she said, I know there are a lot of people that share the same values of me, but nobody's talking to us. So she put together this plan that really was just centered around neighborhood organizing. I'm going to get out, I'm going to have wine and talk to my neighbors, and we're going to talk politics. And at their first meeting, they had 100 people. They decided to organize in 14 precincts. And in 2018, during the midterms, those 14 precincts had the highest voter turnout in the state of Texas. So we knew we were onto something, right? We knew that what we were doing worked, and that what we needed to do was expand and talk to more people. So we since then expanded into 4 chapters throughout Austin and San Antonio, and really continued to do the work of voter education, voter registration, and getting out the vote based on literally talking to our neighbors, organizing down to the precinct level, and making sure that nobody's left out of the equation. And, you know, what we know also from 2018 is that 100 million people sat out, right? They didn't show up to vote. And Texas is a non-voting state. We're notoriously at the bottom of voter turnout. And so we have been determined to turn that around. And during 2018, with mass voter registration, mass turnout push, you know, we increased young voter turnout by 508% in Texas. So the voters are there. The demographics are changing. People in Texas had given up on voting because we're so severely gerrymandered, and we're so, as Democrats, the message is your vote doesn't matter in Texas. And what we've tried to do is change that conversation. And literally by talking to our neighbors and organizing this small army of folks to get out and to do it. And, you know, we're incredibly excited because we're growing throughout other urban areas in Texas, expanding into Dallas and Houston, because you know, it won't be one election in one time, right? As Audre Lorde says, like the revolution is not a one-time event. So Democrats need long-term infrastructure in Texas so that in 2022, we can get rid of the governor. In 2022, we can look at the the Texas State Senate, which almost every seat will be up, right? So we're looking at a long-term game here, and our work really contributes to every candidate on the ballot, because we're teaching the people in our neighborhoods about everybody that's on there, what they stand for, and the importance of voting all the way down the ballot. like the work that you're doing here today, we know that if we flip the top of the ticket, does nothing. If we don't hold the House, flip the Senate. And in Texas this year, we have this huge opportunity to flip the Texas House, which redistricting will happen in 2021. And if we flip the Texas State House, we actually have an opportunity to get fair maps in Texas. And once that happens, it's game over GOP in Texas. That's what has allowed them to stay. We flipped 12 of those seats in 2018. We only need to flip 9 more. So we have a special initiative through Texas Blue Action Democrats where we've been focusing on 17 of those House districts where the Republican lost by 10%. And so we know the votes are there. We've been using strategic data that shows all of the unregistered voters that have a past Democratic history of voting Democratic in the past. And along our I-35 corridor in Texas, which is Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, we have 150 people a day moving in here. So we are making sure that those people are registered. We are making sure that they turn out to vote. In some of our districts, you know, people, the Democratic candidate lost by 46 votes. One of them, it was 436 votes. When we looked at the data, there were 5,000 people in some of those districts that have a voting history of voting Democrat that were unregistered for that election, right? Which would have turned the whole thing around. So that's a long answer to your question, but we're really just working on making sure everybody's registered to vote. They know who's on the ballot, and more importantly, they show up to get it done.
Thank you so much, because you know I really love so much about your organization, the grassroots origins, the long-term view beyond 2020, the look all the way up and down the ticket. You know, really appreciate that. So maybe one last question would be, what are, you know, obviously you're supporting a ton of down ballot races. Are there a couple candidates that you want to shout out? You know, that you'd like folks to know about? Maybe we can drop their links in the chat. And then any like volunteer opportunities or things that people in and out of Texas can get involved with.
Absolutely. You know, to shout out to a few candidates is really hard. Of course, we would love to see MJ, which is what this is about today, be able to flip that seat. We came so close with Beto in 2018. He got the most votes of any Democrat in the history of Texas. I mean, I think that really shows the desire for change here. You know, of course, some of our House candidates, I love Natalie Hurtado, who's down in the North Houston area, and Akila Basie, and Elizabeth Beck up in Dallas, and Selena Montoya here in the San Antonio area. And then congressional candidates, I'm sure you've all heard, and I happen to live in this district, that Wendy Davis, you know, champion of women's rights, is running, and I am so excited to be able to check that box for her. Julie Oliver, another congressional candidate that just is, if you ever meet her, you'll know she is golden as a human and really will do incredible work for her constituents. So, you know, those would be a few. I could go on for too long a time. We have an amazing ticket this year in Texas, a lot of amazing women that are running, and it is just so hopeful. It is so hopeful and so inspiring, and I just love them. In fact, and then to your question about getting involved, on our website, blueactiondems.com, people can check out a number of ways to get involved. I think an important conversation people should be having is that just because you don't live in the state doesn't mean that you can't make calls or texts or send postcards. In fact, one of the most important things I feel that people living in blue states can do is get involved in a battleground state. We know that 12 states will ultimately decide this election. Put your energy there if you can. And of course, you know, always donate to those candidates that you love, because they need the money and it's not easy, and especially on a presidential election year, because everybody tends to throw their money that way. And the little guys, the money goes a lot further and they need it worse. And their job affects your life on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, look us up, blueactiondems.com. Reach out to me directly. You can reach me at blueactiondemocratstx@gmail.com, and we'll plug you in to a phone bank, text bank. We have already written close to 75,000 postcards that'll go out to key districts. We don't normally do a big postcarding effort, but due to COVID, we're not able to knock on as many doors, so we're doing everything as contactless as possible. But we would love to hear from anybody and get them plugged in, no matter where you live.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Lana. We really appreciate having you on here.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. Y'all are doing great work. This is a fantastic event.
Thank you.